The reality is that within the agricultural sector, there isn't an alternative to diesel at present. We don't have electric tractors, we don't have hybrid vehicles, and the agricultural sector is hugely dependent on green diesel. And I'm arguing, as have many others, that we shouldn't be applying a carbon tax when there isn't an alternative available for it. Because the principle behind carbon tax is that it is to encourage people to move to other alternatives. The objective behind it is not to bring in increased additional revenue into the exchequer, but to get people to move to alternative forms. In the case of agriculture, there isn't an alternative to agricultural diesel at the moment. At some stage in the future, that may very well be the case, but at present, it isn't available. And because of that, we shouldn't be applying carbon tax to agricultural diesel. Remember, the agricultural diesel is marked diesel because it is being used for a very specific purpose within the agricultural sector. Now, I know that you'll come back and you'll make the argument that there is a rebate scheme there in place, and that is available for some farmers who have a tax liability. But for contractors and many farmers that don't have a tax liability, they're ending up having to pay this particular carbon tax, and yet there isn't an alternative available to them. So if we accept the principle that carbon tax isn't about bringing in more money to the exchequer, it is about trying to drive change across society and across the economy to more fuel-efficient vehicles, to cleaner vehicles, then we have to accept the principle that we cannot charge it in terms of agricultural fuel, because that alternative just does not exist at present.
Minister.
Thank you. Cahirla, could I just clarify, is this Amendment 134 we are now speaking on?
Well, Deputy Naughton indicated he was speaking on both 133 and 134.
Okay.
So whichever way you want to take.
Okay, thank you. So, because Amendment 134 is, as Deputy Naughton has said there, focused on the agricultural sector, I think Amendment 133 is a lot broader than that. But he's spoken on 134, so I'll confine my comments to that for now. The main exposure that the agricultural sector faces to carbon tax is through the use of marked gas oil, MGO. This, also known as agricultural diesel or green diesel, is already subject to an exceptionally low rate of mineral oil tax, much lower than that applied to auto diesel. The rate of mineral oil tax on MGO is currently 11.8 cents per litre, and this will increase to 13.8 cents per litre in May 2021, following the application of the increase in carbon tax. This compares very favourably with the current rate of mineral oil tax applied to auto diesel, which is 51.5 cents per litre. In Budget 2012, my predecessor made provision for a double income tax relief for farmers to compensate for the increase in carbon tax at the time. Section 66A of the Consolidation Act of 1997 provides that a farmer may take an income tax or corporate tax deduction for farm diesel, including any carbon tax charged in respect of the diesel, and then a further deduction for farm diesel, which is equal to the difference between the carbon tax charged and the carbon tax that would have been charged had it been calculated at the rate of €41.30 per 1,000 litres of farm diesel, which is the 2012 baseline. This relief continues to apply. So while I am mindful of the fact that of the point that Deputy Naughton makes, that of course any change in carbon taxation does have an effect on those who are paying it, and I accept that. On the other hand, there are a set of very, very comprehensive reliefs and supports that are in place for the agricultural sector that I do believe gives a very strong recognition of the challenges they face as we adjust to a lower carbon future. And for those reasons, I couldn't accept the Deputy's amendment.
Deputy Naughton.
Minister, the difficulty I have here is that not only are we discussing the increase in carbon tax from next spring, but we are looking at increasing the carbon tax for agricultural fuel right from now right up to 2030. Now I'm going to deal with this incremental increase in carbon taxes in far more detail at one of my later amendments. But specifically at this point, like we're looking at, an additional tax on the agricultural sector of 27.3 million euro next year in carbon taxes for a sector that doesn't have an alternative available to them. So the objective behind all of these carbon taxes is that over time, as people buy new cars, as they upgrade their heating systems, that they would move to more carbon efficient alternatives or to zero carbon alternatives. And that's the whole objective behind the introduction of carbon taxes. Now, I believe that should be done in incremental blocks rather than on an annual basis, because what happens is on an annual basis is that people tend to absorb that rather than actually motivating them to change. But in the case of the agricultural sector and the farming community, there isn't an alternative for them to move to. Diesel is the only fuel that can currently be used in the agricultural sector. So farmers can't go and get an electric tractor at present. The machinery isn't there. And yes, you make the point regarding the rebates that are there within the agricultural sector. They're all well and good if you have a significant tax liability. But the reality is, and like the Teagasc farm surveys are showing consistently, that many farmers are not making enough of an income on their farm to actually generate a tax liability in the first instance. So as a result of that, they're not in a position to claim the relief back in terms of diesel. And the reality and the practicality here is that farmers don't have an alternative. So why are we taxing them in the manner that we're taxing them? Because this is purely turning out to be a tax rather than an environmental tool to get people to change.
Minister.
But the way it differs from other taxes, Deputy, is because we have made a commitment that we are implementing to use the revenue that is raised from this carbon tax to fund the activities that are needed to lower carbon use in our economy. So unlike every single other tax that I will debate with you in the finance bill, we are not using the revenues from carbon taxation to fund general expenditure. We are using it purely with the objective of putting in place the incentives, the plans, the changes that are needed to lower the use of carbon for Ireland. I've listened carefully to the point that you have made regarding the effect of this increase in carbon tax on the agricultural sector. And again, I do recognise the consequences that they will face, and I acknowledge that. But Deputy, the reliefs that I've outlined earlier on offer a very, very high degree of support for our farmers in dealing with carbon pricing changes. And I think that is legitimate and needed, given the difficulty they do have in changing their vehicles or getting new vehicles that have low levels of diesel use. That's why these reliefs are in place. But like I repeat to you, like the changes that Minister Noonan made in Budget 2012 offer a very high level of support to farmers in coping with the changes that will happen as a result of carbon pricing going up. And, you know, on one hand, you make the point, and you understand the value of these changes as a former minister for in this area. but you made the case for the change being incremental. But that is what we are doing. We are making incremental changes year by year, and we are committing to making these changes for the next number of years until we get to a level of carbon taxation that is of the level that experts believe can make a difference to the amount of carbon used in Ireland. But I'll just conclude by emphasising again that the changes that were made in the budget of 2012 offer a very high level of protection to farmers in dealing with the income consequences of carbon taxes going up.